A couple weeks ago when I was here, I talked about how I have my whole life been concerned about my weight and battled that issue. And a lot of that, some of that, what has not helped that is comparing myself. So when I was a kid, I have two cousins that I was, like, of all my cousins, the two cousins I was closest to, and I'm between them in age, their names are Chad and Nikki. And they are very slender, have always been. Like, Nikki looks a lot like Sarah Jessica Parker. She's built like and looks a lot like Sarah Jessica Parker, the actress. And she's always been that, like, super cute, got her little clutch and her little, like, heels, and, like, she's always really well put together. And there's a picture from when we were kids, and the three of us are sitting on my deck steps, and it's like I'm between them, and I feel like I look like the blimp between these two sticks, because they are both very thin, and then there's me like, and so I've always felt real self-conscious about my weight, because I've always been one of the bigger people in my sphere. Even when I was in college, I worked for 7 years for a cheerleading company, and so I'm traveling around the nation working with these cheerleaders, and most of the girls are like 5 foot tall and 90 pounds, and then here's me, you know? So, like, all those things have really tested my self-esteem. And then, now my best friend Jill, many of you have met her, she is also very slender. And so when she and I go on vacation, I feel like here's this cute little girl, and then there's me. But what I have loved about being friends with Jill over time is Jill's one of those people that when she gets an idea about what is right or wrong, she's a very black and white thinker. And so, like, she will be like, this is right, and therefore that is what I have to do. So she started thinking about health stuff and, like, going organic and not drinking pop and, like, cutting sugar out of her diet. And for her, she's like, well, that is unhealthy, this is healthy, I'm gonna be healthy. And so she just basically stopped eating all the bad foods and started eating really healthy. And when she first did it, I'm like, she is so extra. Like, why does she have to do that all the time? Why can't we just share a piece of cake anymore? Like, and she does still share cake when we're on vacation. But, like, you know, like, but over time, and she has never shamed me. Like, she has never been like, well, I can't believe that you eat like that. Like, she's never been a jerk about it. She just, like, gets excited about what she's eating, and she'll be like, this is what I have for lunch, and it's delicious. Or I made this new recipe, I made these cookies, and they don't have any sugar in them, and I think they're delicious. And she'll let me try them. And over the course of time, through her health journey, her repeated influence, her repeatedly talking about how hot dogs will shave 36 minutes off your life and you should never eat hot dogs. And, like, those kinds of things she talks about over time have gotten me to eat better. Like, and not because she says, you have to do this because you're stupid and fat. She's like, this is the right way and this is what I'm doing. And so over time, that influence has shifted me to become a much healthier person. I now eat organic. I now have I don't drink soft drinks pretty much for the most part anymore. I eat way less sugar than I used to. It's like, because of her influence, her constant influence in my life, I am now healthier. And so, like, it takes someone, when you have been living in a way that's not good for you, and you have someone who's influencing you to do it better, over time, if you're with that influence, over time, you do start to shift the way you think. You do start to shift the way you act, because you've got someone propping you up and someone who is saying, this is a better way. And we need those people in our lives to prop us up. We need those people in our lives to influence us to do a better job. Because left to our own devices, we often make the selfish decisions. So or maybe a not so healthy decision. We grow up one way and then we find out later, like, oh, maybe this way is a little better. We need people in our lives who have a different perspective than us. Because we Americans tend to surround ourselves in an echo chamber so no one challenges us. But we need people who have a different perspective to help us see things from a different way and to evaluate which way is really the best choice for me. And so as I was thinking about this series, it's about founding fathers and these men and women who came together at the start of this country because they were in an oppressive system. They were in this system that was not for them, it was not healthy for them, and they were tired of it, and they wanted out, and they were willing to fight for that. But as these men especially were building the foundation of this country, They needed some influences to give them some other ideas. They needed people propping them up, and they needed people kind of guiding some of their thoughts and pushing them, like, what do you think about this? Don't forget about this. And one of those people that I want to talk about today is Abigail Adams. So Abigail Adams is one of only two or three women in the course of our history who have been both first lady and, I don't know if they're called first mother, but a mother of a president. So she was married to John Adams, second president. She was mother to Quincy Adams, sixth president. And she has been known, like historians say, she's one of the top 3 most influential first ladies. So I've got just a quick little video about her. I like, some people say that Abigail was like all for women's suffrage because she was constantly influencing. She would prop her husband up and like, you can do this, you've got this. But also she'd be like, don't forget the ladies. Don't forget this. What about this? She very much believed that all people should be educated and literate. She taught herself out of her father's library in her home. But she believed that all people of all colors, race, gender should be able to be educated and that they should have a voice. And that was something that the founding fathers they weren't making strides towards. Let's put it that way. I won't say they weren't thinking about it, but they were definitely not making strides towards it. There was a man of color who came to her door one day and he was like, he really wanted to be educated. He asked her to teach him to read. And so she says, a free man, as much as any of the young men, and merely because of his face is black, is he to be denied instruction? How is he to be qualified to procure a livelihood? I have not thought it any disgrace to myself to take him into my parlor and to teach him both to read and write. So she invited a black man into her home and taught him to read and write. And people were like, what are you doing? You can't let that person in your house. What are you thinking? And she's like, he deserves to be educated. How can he have a livelihood if he's not educated? And she stood up for people like that. She stood up for the women. She spoke to her husband and pushed back on him. She influenced him and propped him up to help him as he was one of the founding fathers writing the Declaration, one of the founding fathers helping to create the new policy. Women, some other historians have said, she was venturing to use her influence as a wife to important politician to impact policy. She understood that she couldn't be in the room where it happens. Any Hamilton fans in the house? You've not seen Hamilton?
Oh, that musical?
The musical?
Yeah, I saw that.
In the room where it happens, the room where it happens. She knew she couldn't be in the room where it happens, but she could talk to her husband about what was happening before he went into that room. She could put questions and thoughts into his mind before, and those of us women in the room that have been in a relationship with a man understand that you can't make a man do much of anything. But you can give ideas and you can push and you can surreptitiously. So this other woman says, Abigail hesitated to confront her husband, so she didn't directly confront him with logical ideology and stuff, but she did so circumspectly, surreptitiously, and with covert humor. So she knew how to get him to start to think and ask these questions. If any of you have watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding, oh no, where'd it go? Oh, where are we back? If any of you have ever watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding, right? She's getting married, and the mom says to her Tula, she's like, a man is the head, but the woman is the neck. And she can turn his head any way she wants. That's what it means to influence and to prop someone up. It's not about being like, you have to do this, but it's like asking questions. It's being there for them. It's supporting them, even if they don't always make the decisions you want. But the thing that made Abigail probably one of the most things she is most remembered, she wrote this in a letter in 1770, to her husband. He was in the room where it happens. He was there getting ready to write the Declaration and the Constitution and set up the government. She says, I need you to remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors were. She's like, do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws which we have no voice or representation. Which is kind of funny to me as I read this. I'm like, she is basically saying, don't be to us what England is to America. England is all about, I'm just going to make all these decisions and make you follow them, and I'm going to be this tyrant who tells you what to do and makes you subservient to me. You don't think that's cool. The England is doing that to us. Don't do it to the ladies. Because if left to their own devices, a lot of husbands would do that to their wives. And she was not saying women should be able to vote. She was just saying women should have a voice. Women should be educated, and they should have a voice. People of color should have a voice, and they should be educated. And that was not a popular idea at the time. And he heard it, but a lot of those laws didn't quite make it into our founding documents. But she was there pushing him and propping him up and influencing him. And we need people like that. We need people to prop us up. And one of the biggest influences we need in our lives is the influence of God in our lives. And so many times, a lot of Americans seem to think that they come to church on Sunday and check that box, then they've got God in their lives. And you do, but there are going to be times in our lives when we have to make decisions, and we need the influence of God in that. And the influence of God comes from having that relationship with God. We need to seek him. We need to ask him to help us and be with us in situations. And as I think about the founding fathers of our country and the founding fathers of faith, the story that came to mind of someone who propped up a leader who was not a leader in himself, but who helped prop up and ask questions and turn the head of one of the biggest founding fathers of our faith is this guy named Aaron. So Moses, we've heard of Moses, right? He's the guy that said, let my people go. And Moses had a brother named Aaron. And so when Moses went to, when God was talking to Moses in the bush, and God's like, I need you to go to Pharaoh. Moses was like, I can't, I stumble, I stutter. And God's like, all right, fine. I'll let you take your brother Aaron, because he's good at talking in front of people. And so Aaron would get up and talk, and Aaron would get up and influence, and Aaron would say the things that Moses said to say to him. And then one of the scenes where God was like proving to Pharaoh that he is God, he's like, take your staff and throw it on the ground. It's going to turn into a snake, and you're going to pick it back up. And Moses did that, and Pharaoh was like, oh, that's a cool party trick, and then other people did it, whatever. So finally, Pharaoh lets Moses' people go. They get to the Red Sea, and they're trapped. There's a sea in front of them, and there's an army coming to crush them. And God says, take your staff and put it in the ground. And he said, hold it over the water, and Moses did, and the water parted. So God was in that staff. So when we see the staff of Moses in the Bible, that is God's influence. That is God's presence that we're seeing in that staff. And so the people go through, they get saved, it's all great. Then they're out in the desert, and they're like, dude, it's hot out here, and we're thirsty, and there's no water. And so God says to Moses, I forget. God told Moses to do one thing, but Moses did another. But basically, Moses struck this rock with a stick and water came out of it. And then another time, all these snakes were biting people, and God's like, make some snake replicas, put it on your staff, and put it in the air, and anybody who sees it, they won't die from the snake bites. So this staff was God's presence. It was God's provision. It was God's healing. It was God's influence over their life. And so, when you've got 2.5 million people wandering through the desert, there are other people living in the desert, and they don't like that the city of Los Angeles, basically, is wandering through their territory, right? So there were times they would come across people, and these people like, you can't come through our land. You're not going to tread all over our stuff and eat all of our food. Like, no. And so they would have to fight them. And God would be with them, and God's like, I'm with you. I am going to influence you where you go, and I'm also going to fight for you. So there is this other guy in Moses' scene. His name is Joshua, and Joshua was super brave, and he was this mighty warrior. And so they go to battle these guys named the Amalekites, and Joshua goes down to fight them, but Joshua by himself is not strong enough. He needs God's power and God's strength to win the battle. So here's the story. So the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, pick some men, go and fight those Amalekites tomorrow. I'm going to stand on top of the hill holding this stick, this staff that God told me to carry. And Joshua did. So Moses was like, this stick, the staff is pretty important in Moses' life. He's like, I'm going to hold it over you. And as long as I'm holding it over you, you're going to win. So Joshua does it. So Joshua goes out, he's fighting the Amalekites, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur are standing on top of the hill, and Moses is holding the stick, which is like God's provision, God's protection, God's influence over their lives. And then Moses gets tired, because the stick was not heavy, but to hold it for hours, that's tough. And he starts to shake. So then Aaron and Hur, they go find him a rock. And so it says as long as Moses holds up his arms, the Israelites are winning. But when he puts his arms down, the Amalekites start to win. So Moses' arms are getting tired. Aaron and Hur bring a stone for him to sit on. So they're like, we're going to help you out. They knew they couldn't hold the stick. They can't hold the staff. It's Moses' staff. But they can help Moses. They can prop him up. They can give him the help that he needs. So while they stood beside, so basically Moses sits down and they each hold his arms so that he can still hold the staff. Because sometimes we don't have the power by ourselves. We need someone else to prop us up. Sometimes we need someone else who is there giving us the strength, the influence, the courage that we need to make better decisions. And so basically Joshua won because Moses had help. Because Moses, who was the guy who had held the stick of power, if you will, but he needed help. We all need help. We all need someone to prop us up. We all need someone to influence us in a good way. We need someone who's talking to us when we're at our low point, when we're questioning, when we're making bad decisions. We need someone who's like, is that really the best decision? Someone who is supporting. If you think about husband and wife, I think about Abigail and John Adams. Think about the typical role of husband and wife. That the man is the leader in a biblical time, the man was the leader of the house, but the wife propped him up. She pushed, she asked him questions, she guided him, but she also supported him. She helped take care of him. She watched over him. And that is an image of what our relationship with God looks like. God's letting us do the things. He's letting us live our lives, and he is there to prop us up. He is there to push us. He is there to influence us. He's allowed us to be the head of our lives, but if we let him, he'll be the neck that turns the head to see the things that we need to see. Because left to our own devices, we look straight ahead, and we don't want to look at these other things because they might change our perspective. And God puts people in our lives to say, well, what about this? What about that? But also, he puts people in our lives to encourage us. And so for me, that's what Jill is. She's the person who encourages me, who challenges me, who props me up when I'm down. We need to have these kinds of people. And I'm not married, so I don't have a husband to be that person. So I have a friend. God has given me a friend to be that person. So for those of us in the room who are single, it doesn't have to be your spouse. Or maybe your spouse isn't that person for you. You might have a spouse, but that's not who they are for you. But we need people who prop us up, who turn our head to help us see things, and we also need to allow God to be that for us. We need to allow God to influence us. We need to allow God to turn our heads to see things that we don't want to see. 'Cause sometimes, when I walk into Target and there's that dollar section, I'll be like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to be influenced by those cheap deals, right? But sometimes God wants us to look around. We need people who say, look over here, look over there, but also I'm going to support you. And that's what Abigail was to John. She said, look over here, but also I'm going to support you, even if you don't do what I want you to. And that's what God is for us. Look over here, look over there, and also I'm going to support you, even when you don't do what I want you to. When we want to take new ground in our lives, when we want to break out of a bad situation, a bad habit, we need those people in our lives. And we need God. We need to allow God to have that opportunity in our lives. And the only way that God can have that opportunity is if you take time to talk to him. If you read the Bible and learn who he really is, and not the version of him that you've been told he is, because there's a lot of misinformation about God out there. And so we need to allow God to be our Abigail, and we need physical Abigails in our lives to prop us and to influence us. So I want you to think about who those people are in your lives. And I dare you this week to contact one person who has encouraged, challenged, or supported you. Maybe send them a thank you card, or just I'm thinking of you card, or hey, you know what? When I was going through this, you really showed me a new perspective, and I just want to say thank you. That was really helpful to me. Thank them specifically, whether it's a thank you note, whether it's a text, whether you have dinner with them, whatever. There is someone in your life who has been an Abigail to you, an Aaron, a her to you. Who has that been? Make sure you're telling them. They might not even know. They might have no idea that you have been that person for them. And I know that they would be tickled pink to hear, especially if it's real mail, to get a note from you. Ask God, Lord, who have you placed in my life to help me to grow, and who I'm not fully appreciating? Who in my life do I need to send a thank you to? Who in my life, Lord, do I need to maybe be a little more grateful or do a little more listening to? You could read Exodus 17 and pay attention not just to Moses and Joshua, who are like most people say are the main characters, but to Aaron and Hur. What would have happened had Aaron and Hur not been there? What if Moses had gone by himself up on that hilltop, be like, I got this, I don't need nobody? What would have happened in that battle without them? And to engage, spend some intentional time this week with someone who challenges you and to be a better Christian, especially someone who's challenging you in your faith. Who is that person for you? Spend some time with them. Get coffee with them. Go for a walk. Get dinner, whatever. Who is that person who pushes you, who turns your head to see things that maybe you wouldn't turn your head to see on your own? And who can we be that person for? Who can I be an Aaron or her for? These are things to ask yourself this week. And all of God's children said, amen.